Hi guys, welcome to Robin Hood Diaries this evening. Well, evening for me, wherever, whatever time, welcome. Thank you for joining me. Tonight was previewed as something along the lines of an agenda that I had with my being a drag queen and how that sort of evolved and what that means and how it ended up. I'm gonna roll through this like I did roll through last night, just punching as much information as I can. So if I seem a little more manic than usual, hard to do, that's what you're seeing. Okay, so how that whole preview sort of works into all of this. So I'm doing phone sex back in the day, and we all know after Johnny died. So there's this, let's just say, I don't want to use the F word, let's just say rag mag. Rag mags were little things when we didn't have the internet that tells us who, what, where, when, A-list, underground, what night is what club. Only way to find out. So I see that while I'm doing phone sex. Now I'm supervisor of the phone sex people. And so I see this magazine, it's called Spunk. So in and around that time, wrapping up my work as Angela, a friend of mine at the time, who is now some kind of mogul for whatever, walking jewelry, and so he was just a little teeny friend of mine, as I was a little teeny person with nothing, and he brought me to a party, and then he brought me to, I believe, a club. And this is sort of where it all started for me. And I'm going to say underground because it's a really lame-ass term, but I don't know what else to call it. So underground. So then I'm sort of hobnobbing-ish on the sort of like, like the event horizon of this whole thing. So then I'm like, okay, so I'm winding down as phone sex. I mentioned the other day I was looking through the Advocate. I find this position with the health department, with the county. So because of my, whatever, caregiving and years of, death from HIV, AIDS, and all that, I lent myself very well to the project, which was a groundbreaking project, basically pushed forward by the Centers for Disease Control to do groundbreaking early work with a certain male set of folks. Okay, so I go to this party and it's around time, let's imagine I'm sort of looking through the Advocate. So then I'm like, sniff, 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 this is like interesting scene. So then in and around that time, I get the answer from the Advocate, then I start a whole new life. Then everything that I had been through from 1988 to 1991 meant something, because this was an HIV, this was with the HIV epidemiology program within the Office of AIDS Programs and Services, but it was a county function to get this information from the ground. So it was like everything was driven by the CDC, every move we made, whatever. And I was doing community assessment, which is research in the streets. I was analyzing research, collecting and analyzing. And then I went on to do, you can check it, clinical work at East Valley Community Health Center, East Valley Clinic. These are all on the outskirts of LA County, and then went on to do more intensive social work. Okay, so that's where it sort of led to where I ended up in this crisis, which was nowhere near over in 1980, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so now I'm sort of looking at this Spunk magazine. I've got this like whatever friend, and I'm like switching into this county job, and I'm asked to be doing this community assessment, which means I'm going to places like shady ass places and places that I just, some of which I decided on because I'm an Angelino, and where we can click, click, click and do research and then do blood draws and all this stuff. So I'm just in and around that time, right? So then I'm getting into drag. So it turns into those like 2 or 3 parties, 2 clubs, then leaning towards drag. Then I'm hanging out with a person who shall remain nameless, who was a bit of a character at the time. So I'm in with her and sort of learning the ropes, and then she is very friendly with another drag queen who's very famous right now, and one a transgender person that has since passed. So I'm in this mix now. I'm starting the mix. And I show up at this nameless person who sort of further intros me into the scene after this friend. And of course, he's doing drag all the time. He's got a thing. He's already in there in the trenches of drag in West Hollywood. Although no, kind of this larger LA area, let's say, because our troublemaking made it all over the city. Okay, so then I'm getting in the thick of it. Okay, but I'm still now doing heavy research analysis for the county. I'm heavily impacted by HIV impacted communities because of what had, we all know what happened to Sean from 88 to 91. So I'm deep in this research because I have like some skin in the game on this one. Right? Okay. So I'm looking at drag and I'm looking at the populace. A lot of us, I hate to say this, but we're on the older side. Even in that crowd, it wasn't quite as like Gen Z-ish. But I'm looking at the demographic, I'm lending it to my work, and I thought, not as calculated as it sounds, but part of what's threading through my head is, how do I reach these people? How do I reach them, as famous as they are, and their subsets, and the friends who worship their subsets, and whatever? What if, type of thing, right? So I'm now doing extensive street work for the county. And I am now with this intro friend, and I show up at her door one day in full drag. Okay, so we won't go. My trademark was like tacky drag. I wasn't like, playing with mommy's clothes as a kid. I shopped at Playmates, which is where all sex workers shop. Not to generalize, but I lived there, and that was like, they literally had a bargain basement. I mean, I wore everything but like, gorilla shorts. So I'm deep in the scene. I'm deep in the scene, right? So, to be deep in the scene, you're on A-list, B-list, C-list, you're going to the right club on the right night, and meeting the right people, except Brian Raven, I love you. And, knowing the right people and going, and blah, 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 moves up and whatever. So, and then there's this interplay of these rag mags, as I mentioned. So I'm like, whatever, kind of lateral moving up or down or sideways in the drag scene. And Michael Carr, who is actually an old friend of my husband's, very long story. He is sort of a prime mover in sort of the underground movement. And I can go on forever about Michael Carr. Darling man, he's happy with a partner, and I just love that he has a lovely life. So Spunk Magazine hires Michael Carr to do a centerfold spread on me, not like, Cosmopolitan Magazine, but, there was like 5 pages and whatever. And I'm like loving this. Okay. So we go out to Thai food. I know him anyway. We're talking. And from that, he gleans this great interview. So, okay. So now I've seen the other side of it. I'm like, And my agenda, which I'll sort of clarify a little bit more clearly, starts to kind of bleed into what all the things that I was doing. So then I'm hardcore research analysis in the streets, and I'm hardcore drag queen. And then my mentor, JD, is at one point or another always been in sort of like the editorial end of what was going down, in addition to the creative aesthetic of what was going down. In this scenario, I was writing for JB, and it was a broken column with other people, and I wrote very amusing columns. So then I get noticed again in the scene, and working so intensely, I mean, the hours at the county were just, there were no hours. It's like being on salary. You're just like, whatever, ball and chain, man. So now I'm seeing what I'm seeing, and I'm writing, thanks to JB. And then I move from that to Planet Homo, that is Planet Homo, I'm sorry. I moved from there. Actually, my JB, one of my mentors, moved sort of to another magazine that she edited, was the editor of. Long story short, and there's this magazine, this rag mag, which was upscale, more of like an Advocate, like bigger, whatever, called Forefront. Then I'm like, bingo, I can sort of let go of drag now. Because I moved from a bit of a column to like a bit like larger column at this other magazine called Yes, and then I make it to Forefront. Now Forefront is like the mag. It was far beyond a rag mag. They had, health, they had astrology, they had features, human interest, celebrities of sorts. So they asked me to do a column. It starts as, I think, like a half page, and then it becomes a full page. And then by the end of it, I get a guaranteed 2 pages, usually centerfold, in Forefront. What this was all about was my HIV work. Again, remember now, I had just met my husband. We're a couple years into a year, we're 95. We're 96. By the time I'm working for Forefront, we're looking at 96. We are, trust me, in the thick of it, okay? I did extensive work after this. And so this becomes a forum for me to just vomit HIV information. I would turn it into a dream I had. I would give experiences that I had. I would tell about meetings that I had. I would paint ugly pictures of opponents within the movement and give them characters, like I said, make it like a fairy tale or not, or name names. And this is when it started to fill out into this guaranteed 2-page centerfold. I forget what on the front lines is what they called it. So I'm like now in the thick of this. I'm way easing up on drag now because I have worked my way from the county. I give up that work to do clinical work. Then I'm clinical work here, clinical work there. And then while I'm doing that, then I do social work where I've got a caseload of 120 patients, clients, that you have to account for every 15 minutes of your work, and you're going through a caseload of 120 people a month and whatever. So I have a forum now for getting this information out in a 2-page spread, all from being this neophyte drag queen. And it is like, I get fans. Like, I would be at AIDS projects and like twice this guy's like, oh, I love your article, blah, 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 blah. Because it wasn't just some article. I had, again, major skin in the game with this one. And so I schooled much of LA City, if not the county, at that time, reaching certain demographics that were untouchable for a lot of people in the way that I touched them. So, golly gee, I went on. I moved from being the social worker with that gigantic caseload closer into Pasadena, where I worked it more extensively in client services, and then in contract management, and then client services, contract management. And then I went on and went on and went on. Then I was teaching PhDs how to write grants, and then I worked for Mattel and whatever. So anyway, that I guess you could call an agenda. Like, I guess you really could, from that moment at that first party with what's his name, to today. Well, I'm retired, but whatever. So anyway, I'm sure I kept you too long, and I'm so glad that you could share this kind of frenetic story with me. I've been meaning to get it out one day. And I try to keep things not, duplicative. So like I know I've talked about drag, but I touched on this, but I was in that arena, but then this is the other area. So I don't just try and talk about like death and drag and funny and this, that, and the other, whatever. I try to comb it out first. Good idea for a show. I help somebody get into a very, very difficult union to get into as a makeup artist. That would be interesting. Anyway, I love you, and you know all the reasons why. So I'm going to let you go, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.